start of this video I've decided to show my face, and I have a very serious look on my face. I am being very serious. Normally this channel is not recommended for people under the age of 14 due to the nature of the parts and the equipment that we use. However, in this particular build we're going to be using some more dangerous equipment, so I am going to give this whole series a standard warning: not recommended for anyone under the age of 18. The equipment that I use can cause serious harm and in rare cases even death, so I strongly advise you not to follow along if you're a minor, and I will not be responsible for anything that happens to you as a result of doing what I'm doing. So serious face off. So welcome to what I'm calling issue 0 of the Flying Scotsman. The reason I'm calling this issue 0 is because in the first stages, the first 4 stages, which I'm going to be doing today where I can, it's just really going to be a little bit of practicing. Now I'm making one change to the magazine that I wouldn't normally do, and it tells you to glue these parts in. Now those of you remember the previous time I attempted this, I did glue the parts in and they really weren't very strong, and it was recommended to me to solder the parts in. Now I have a confession. I did try to film these and I made an absolute hash up of it, and the reason I made a hash up was because I used ordinary solder, which just will not work on things like this where the temperatures need to be a little bit lower. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be doing some messing around, not messing around, I don't want to use that word, but we're going to be having a little play. We're going to be playing with 3 different types of solder. We're going to play with some glue, and we see we've got some brass plates. So none of these bits of brass are the original parts, however they are the same kind of materials. So the first piece of equipment I want to show you is this photo etch tool. Now this is designed to bend parts. Now we will be getting an awful lot of parts where we need to bend them, and the one difference between these parts and the part that I've got today, you'll see that it's telling you to bend using a pair of pliers, which is fine, that will work. However, I much prefer to use a photo etch bender. Now all of the parts that you need to bend will generally have a score mark on them, and I've made this little piece of brass and I've put a little score mark on it. It's not particularly brilliant, but it will serve the purpose for this video really well. So to use a photo etch bender, let me put it back in its original state. So what you do is you have these, you have a strong plate at the base. You have 2 kind of springs, and then you have this plate which you clamp down, and what you do is, you see here you've got various different sizes of these marks here, and what you need to do, the piece that you need to bend, you need to find one that is a little bit bigger than the part that you're bending. So as you can see, all these ones down here, these are all far too small. This particular one, I would say that's too small just, so we'll use this one perhaps. If you find that that's not big enough, you can remove this and then you can turn it around, and now you've got this full plate there, and today we'll use that. I like to try and work as close to the middle as I possibly can. And the way you do it is you start off with it clamped, you unclamp, you undo it until there's enough gap there to slip the brass plate under, and then what you do is you pop the part in like so, just until that line. You always bend towards the line, so if the line is there, you're going to bend it that way, not that way. And we'll place that into there like so, and then once we're happy with how it's placed, we tighten these up and loosen them ever so slightly, and then you can get any kind of tool and then you can reposition that exactly how you feel is perfect, and I think that's perfect. Now with these photo etch benders, you tend to get a razor blade with a little plastic guard on it, so this is not coming off, but there's a little bit of plastic on there, and so that will stop it from cutting me. Obviously this side is very sharp, and what we do is we take this metal razor blade or whatever, it's basically a very thin piece of metal, and we push that into there, and then it will get caught on the guard there. Sorry, the light is terrible, but anything shiny will reflect the light. So you see I've pushed that as far as I can with the guard, and then I'm just going to lift it slightly at the back just to allow that guard to go in, and then we can continue to push it until it becomes level, which I can't now because the piece of brass is too long, so we'll just try and lift that piece up with whatever tools we can. There we go, and then we push that in, and then what we do is we begin from here, we begin to lift it up, and then what we do is we will bend that to the desired angle. Now in this particular case I want it 90 degrees, but you could bend it 45 degrees, 30 degrees, 10 degrees, whatever you want. And there we have a perfectly bent piece of metal. Now this is a little bit rounded, and that's because this hasn't been professionally cut. The way that the parts will be cut, this will go a much sharper angle than that. So understand that the reason that that's not a sharp angle is because it's a homemade piece. So anyway, there's our piece, and I've pre-made some other pieces ready for our little, shall we call it, experimenting discovery session. So let's discover some other equipment. So another piece of equipment that I may find useful is this helping hand. Now these come in 2-arm formats. This particular one is in a 6-arm format with a missing crocodile clip. I must glue these in actually one day because they do keep falling out. But yeah, this I've still got 5 arms. You can get some with more arms. You can make your own with as many arms as you want, but this is particularly handy if you want to hold a piece into position. I'm just doing this roughly, but let's suppose you wanted to hold this into place there, so you could solder that or glue it in or whatever you wanted to do. You could do that, and then that just saves you saves your hands, because we only have 2 hands unfortunately. And how many times as a modeler have we said, oh, I wish I had a 3rd hand? Well, this is your 3rd hand. But I'm not sure how much I'll use this during this build, but it's handy in case I need it. The next thing we will need is a soldering iron, and I will show you a thing called tinning. This is a brand new tip for this project, so I do need to tin this tip. And obviously we need something to hold the solder iron in, and we've got ourselves a wet pad, and we've also got ourselves a tip cleaner. As you'll see on that tip cleaner, it's got some rosin flux, I think it's called, with rosin flux, so that will help clean the tip. So I also have liquid flux. And I also keep, and I may not be using this so much, but this is a flux paste. Now what flux does is it cleans the area before you solder, so it helps make a better contact. But this is flux in liquid format. And then I also have, this is what I'm going to be playing with today. This is my solder wire, and this is bog standard ordinary solder wire. This particular one is lead free, and the way that solder wire works, it's actually a rod. You cannot see in there on the camera, but there's a little tiny hole in the middle, it goes all the way through, and that's filled with flux. And the idea is that as you melt the solder onto the piece, it gives it a little bit of a clean. The reason we have flux is just that we can use extra. The next solder wire that I have that I'll be playing with today, the next two I've never seen and never used before. Now this is a different solder, and as you can see from the label, I've got the Sapphire 145. It's detail solder, high flow, and I don't really know much about this, and I believe this is a low melt solder. The problem I had is when I searched for low melt solder on Amazon, you don't just get low melt solder. They seem to use the word solder. I actually bought this thinking it was a low melt solder, but it just picked up on the word solder. So I'm making the assumption that this one melts at about 145 degrees, hence the different numbers. However, that's what we're going to find out today. The last solder, I've never seen anything like this before, but this is made for modelers, and this comes in block format, and this is definitely a low melt solder, and this one works at 70 degrees. Now I'm not sure if you cut bits off this, place it on the part, or if you melt it beforehand and then bring it onto the parts, but we're going to do both today, so we'll find out how it works. We're also going to find out if it's best using a solder iron or a hot air blower. So that's what we're aiming to do today. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I have my brass piece, which as you can see is extremely shiny, and it's messing about with the light. So let me just play with my light as much as I can. I'm trying to get, I think that's the best I'm going to do. Right, so one thing we need to do with all pieces of brass, regardless of the system that we're using, is we need to do what we call keying up. Now what I'm doing is I'm using a piece of 800 grit sandpaper. It's just a fine sandpaper, and what we're going to do is we're going to run across the whole surface there, and that just removes the top surface, makes it a little bit rougher, and it just gives it a little tiny bit more surface area to stick to, like so. Now you would only key up the surface that you're going to stick. For the purposes of today, I'm keying up the entire area. So let me just give that a bit of a clean. Giving it a clean really never hurts. And alcohol is probably the best thing to clean it with. So let me get some little bit of alcohol. So that's nice and clean, and it's also very stinky from the alcohol. Right, so what I'm going to do next, and this is purely for today's experiment, I want to divide this up into 8 sections, so that when we've finished we will have a little grid that we can see, and I'll refrain from putting the numbers on until I've put the pieces on. So the first system that we're going to use is we're going to glue it on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, so I've only got 6 pieces. I may have to bend some more brass. So number 1, we're going to be doing glue. So I'm going to use this brush and nozzle, and I like to use this sorry, I just seen a message I got. So right, so all we're going to do is we're going to take the piece of brass, apply a little bit of glue, and should we stick that straight in the middle? There we go. And that's stuck on okay, in all fairness. Not having a problem with that. Oh, now I am having a problem with it. So you can see that I just pulled it a bit too hard. In all fairness, it hasn't dried properly, but it has then also created a bit of a mess. That's not a problem because I can clean it up. But that is number one. And I shall just write down on a piece of paper, number one, super glue. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to heat up my soldering iron, and while that's heating up I'm going to show you the effect of flux. I can't show you the effect of flux because my solder iron hasn't warmed up yet. So right, so I'll see you in a second, guys, when the iron's warm. Okay, so I have myself a hot iron, and the first thing we need to be doing is tinning it. I'll go through tinning in another video because the main focus here isn't about tinning, but what we need to do is just coat this iron with lots of solder. When I say lots, I mean plenty. And I am using a silicone mat. And what we're basically doing is just coating that tip, and then we're removing that. Right, there we go. So, let me show you the basics of how flux works. So we have, I'm going to call this number 2. So what we're going to do is we want to put a little bit of solder on the brass plate, and I'm really not liking that light. It's really not working well with brass, is it? So what we want to do is we want to place some solder there, and this is the wrong solder. And so what we're going to do, we'll melt a little bit of solder onto here. And then we want to place this solder onto the brass plate. Right, sorry, bear with me a sec. And as you can see, it really isn't going very well. Mainly because it's not even melting it. So, I don't know if you can see that, but it really doesn't want to go. And it's just not sticking to the brass plate. I'm just going to bang the heat up a bit. So I don't know if you can see that. It's really hard to control. Let me put a big blob on. So we can get the solder on, but it's just not really going where we want it to go. It's stuck very nicely, there you go. See, it's flown off. It's just not working, is it? So what we'll do is we'll pop a little bit of flux on with a brush. Trying to get just trying to get the bristles wet here. So put a little bit of flux on. I don't know if you can see, but it's just controlling a little bit. They're still not working. There you go. So I don't know if you've managed to see that, but I've just managed to control it a lot better. Can you see that? Now if I try that again where there's no flux, which is up here, there will be a little bit of flux, and that's coming from, that's going to come from the actual solder wire, but you can see it's a lot harder to control. Trying hard here, but and the brass plate is beginning to warm up now. So there you go. So that's the basics of flux. It's just a lot easier, it's a lot neater, it's a lot easier to control. So what we're going to do now then is we are going to try some different fluxes out, and I'll start with this one because it's a lot lower temperature. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and solder this brass plate to the lower brass plate. And the way we're going to do that is we will go back to our glue. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to pin it in place, so to speak. So I'll just pop a dab of super glue just in the corners. And then what that will do is that will just hold that into place. So look, it's not strong, but it's held in place. And I'm going to try this low melt solder first. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to melt a little bit off onto my silicone mat. Just take off what I think I'll need, and then I'm going to clean my tip, and I'm just going to pop some. You could always apply this this flux into a container, but what I've done is I poured it straight on, and I don't know if you noticed, but the capillary action, it's just followed where the contact is, so this flux has run underneath. So what we want to do now is, if I've just making a long line, and then using my tweezers I can then pick that up I've got a feeling that this might be the best method, but that it might also be the most fiddly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remelt that solder into that joint. May need a bit more flux. Okay, can you tell this is my first time using this? Don't even know if you can see what I'm doing. So what we're trying to do is warm the brass up to a higher temperature than the actual solder, and that's what's going to make it stick. It's going to try and bond. It won't bond because it's different metals, but and I may actually be using the wrong tip. And it also might be too hot. Right, okay, I think I'm just changed the way that the experiment's going. This isn't working for me. Okay, I'm going to try something different, and I'm going to step forward something else that I was going to do, and that is I was going to use a hot air blower. So that is definitely melting it. I think I may actually have to use both. And that's actually removed the whole piece of brass. It's melted all the salt. Okay guys, this isn't working for me, is it? Oh. Gotta be honest with you guys, this is not as I'm expecting it to go. It's on stronger. Now it's come off. Right. Okay, let me try something different. Right. Right. Oh. Right, I'm just going to let that set for a minute just to cool down a little bit. I think I may have cracked it. Okay, so let's have a look at this. That's actually pretty good. It's not soldered there because I mucked it up, but I think that's pretty good. So I think I'm going to do that again. So right, I'm going to ignore all these numbers now because I kind of found my method as I was going along. Obviously once you found a method, so even though half of that is soldered on, that's coming off there, but it's not coming off there. I think I could break it off, but I'd have to apply a lot of force. So let's compare it to the glue. Yeah, that didn't take too much force, and that was a good glue. I'm going to just take this as far as I can. Yeah, but you can see it's only soldered on by a little point, and that was a lot harder to take off. So I'm actually going to try and reapply this. So I think I found my method. I don't know if this is the correct method, so I'll just get off excess flux, excess solder I meant, and I'm just going to make a little puddle of flux there, I think. And the good thing about this is because it comes in a block, if you melt off too much solder, you can always pop it back on the block and use it again another time. So we'll spread that out. Got a confession to make, guys. I actually burnt my finger earlier on, and part of the reason I took a break was to go and get an ice cube. It's feeling better, but not perfect. Have to do is take little blobs of it. Guys, if any of you know a better method than this, please tell me. But what I'm doing is I'm cutting tiny balls off, letting it melt a little bit. Don't know how this is going to work for complex shapes. Okay, this isn't working well for me, is it? Okay guys, looks like at this stage I'm feeling like I might just be gluing it all in. Okay, I'm going to cut and I'm just going to work out some things. Okay guys, so I'm actually putting all of this away. As you can see, I've given it a go. I did just manage to stick this on, and then I put some solder on, and after about 20 minutes work, I was getting rather hopeful. I was getting the solder in. It took me about 20 minutes, and I thought if I can complete this I can then show you how I did it. And then I got the file out and I tidied it all up and it fell off. So I'm going to consider this a complete and utter failure. I'm not giving up on the project, but I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. The super glue that I'm using this time is much stronger than the glue I used before. So let me put a dab on here. Let's stick that onto there. Carefully, obviously. Now obviously that would be carefully placed. I'm now going to get another piece. I'm going to put, that's too much glue on there, I think. I'm obviously doing this quickly, and I'm going to stick that onto there. I just realised I dropped my metal cards. Stick that onto there. And I'm going to let that dry, and I'll see you in a moment guys. Okay, so I've allowed this to dry, and I've got to be honest with you, this is the most sturdy thing I've produced all morning, is using glue. Look at this, that's strong enough, isn't it? And this is gluing in a regular shape. So I'm going to give up soldering for the moment. I hate to use the word give up. Normally when I struggle with something I persevere, but as you can see, by using a Gorilla Glue or a good glue, I won't call this glue, I'll call it a good glue, I've actually produced a much better result. I mean look, this is the disaster. This isn't much better than what I produce with any other solder, except that this has cost me about 20-30 quid in solders to produce nothing better than I did before. So I can hear you asking the question, well, why am I putting this video out if it's a complete and utter failure? I don't believe that in such thing as a failure. Hopefully there'll be people out there watching this going, oh well, she's done this, she's done that, or hasn't done that. So please leave a comment below. I've got this solder that melts at a really low temperature. I've used the solder iron hot, I've used the solder iron low temperature. All I've really achieved today is a big blister on my finger where I managed to touch the hot air gun at 500 degrees, and that really hurt. And I've discovered that not using cheap Poundland super glue is, or sorry, using this glue produces a much better result than the cheap £1 super glue. So look at this guys, right? Is that not sturdy enough? So the next video is going out next week, which unfortunately means that I do produce my videos in advance, so it does mean that I will be starting to glue up. But if you want to leave any comments in the video, links to YouTube videos, I think this is one subject you probably can't learn just by watching YouTube, but that's really strong. I'm really happy with how strong that is. That is strong, isn't it? And these solder joints are weak, so obviously I can't solder, and I apologize for giving you a failure video. but I've always tried to say that, you know, for every failure you're one step closer to success. So I will hopefully catch you in the next video, which will be issue 1 proper, from about stage 4 or 5 onwards, and let's hope by the end of this build we end up with something absolutely fantastic. Take care guys, bye bye.